Good evening. Tonight's viewing was of The Invisible Agent, which is how you might describe my agent. Um, I don't have an agent. It's part of the Invisible Man collection, legacy collection, but also series because the main character, Frank Raymond, is actually Frank Griffin and a descendant, the grandson, I believe, of the original Invisible Man. And he has the secret of invisibility, and the movie opens with the Nazis coming for it. But before we get to that, tonight I finally got to see Hotel Transylvania. It was a long time coming. I was very excited, and it was fine. I might have, if I'd been a little kid, it might have been one of my favorite movies, but maybe not. But I am a fan of Adam Sandler, and so I appreciated his movie. It had all the voices that you would think an Adam Sandler movie would have if you know anything about Adam Sandler movies, and you're probably better off if you don't, but I do, and I liked it. We also watched two episodes of the Booth at the End, I think it's called. There's all sorts of names that I've been calling it, and that continues to be interesting. Uh, we watched A Treehouse of Horror, one of my favorites, the one that includes the Bart and Hugo segment, and then we watched the original 1984 Frankenweenie, which is the short, less than a half hour long movie Tim Burton made very early in his career in 1984. That would go on to become, it evolved into many years later, the stop motion animation, I think it's stop motion, Frankenweenie expanded out to feature length, and when Burton was able to do more of what he wanted to do originally, I guess. So that was nice. That was an unexpected pleasure. And I think that was the last thing that we watched before The Invisible Agent, which is less of a monster movie and more of a spy thriller, war movie, um, all sorts of other things, and a very clear um, step in the evolution that I've mentioned from these characters being monsters to these characters being superheroes. Um, if you don't count the Frankenstein movies, especially the last one, The Ghost of Frankenstein, where the monster is essentially the Hulk in so many ways. But the Invisible Man, the Invisible Agent, is kind of Captain America because he's a guy who injects himself with chemicals or gets chemicals injected. The chemicals affect his body, and the way that they affect his body is used in the war effort to help defeat the Nazis. And that is a sense, from my limited understanding from just the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that is essentially Captain America. Um, so that was interesting to see. Also interesting to see for the first time was Peter Lorre. I don't know for sure if I've ever seen a Peter Lorre movie before tonight. It's unfortunate that the Hungarian American Jewish actor was playing a Japanese baron, but it's fortunate that I felt that I could recognize his voice from a joke in an honest trailer, the honest trailer for Aladdin, about Robin Williams doing an impression of Peter Lorre as the genie. So that was fun, if not ideal. Also in this movie was Cedric Hardwicke, who was yes, he was in The Ghost of Frankenstein. He was the most recent Frankenstein, Ludwig Frankenstein. In this movie, he's a Nazi. Oh, there were a couple of things I wanted to note about the cast of Frankenweenie. Shelley Duvall is the mother of Victor Frankenstein, and the father is played by Daniel Stern, who is best known as Marv, one of the bandits from the Home Alone movies, and who I have only seen playing something approximating a real person once before, and that is in the Aidy Bryant Hulu series Shrill, which is very good. And then just one more, not that anybody would know necessarily this man's name. I suppose some would. Joseph Marr. He plays the Frankenstein's neighbor in Frankenweenie, and he is also the guy in the episode of Seinfeld where Seinfeld has to look after someone's dog. He's the guy whose dog Seinfeld is looking after, the guy who sits next to Seinfeld on the plane and has to be taken off and taken to the hospital, and Seinfeld takes his dog. So I was proud of myself for recognizing that. And then Daniel Stern, I knew he looked familiar, but I also knew he wasn't Vince Vaughn. And so there's that. But back to The Invisible Agent and the people in Invisible Agent. Those were the only two, Peter Lorre and Cedric Hardwicke, the only two of note. More cool things that they do with the Invisible Man shtick. They have him at one point lather up in a tub, so he's invisible. He gets in a tub and then he starts lathering soap on him. And also on another time, he puts on face cream, which of course molds to his face, and so he goes from invisible to face cream, and then he puts on the sunglasses. So you see him slowly come into focus, even though the actor's still invisible. And then they do that for a while he's with the black velvet thing that does the invisible effect. But then they ditch that when he's done visibilizing himself, and you can see his teeth. And so I joked, because of course he wouldn't necessarily have done this, although maybe the character did, that he put the face cream on his teeth, and that's why you could see his teeth. But it was just that he wasn't doing the invisible special effect anymore. I think there were a few others of note, but it's just mostly of note about these movies is how just the camera moving in the right way and various inanimate objects moving in the right way, even if there's no actor in a velvet suit or whatever the suit was made of. I think it was black velvet. Even if there's no one physically there moving the things in an invisible suit, just the camera and the stagecraft really work well for establishing that there's an invisible person there. And I've seen it also work well on stage. And I once again, if there is not already a stage version of The Invisible Man that utilizes all of this stagecraft, I think that there should be. The Nazi plot. I don't know who made the movie version of The Mortal Storm, but The Mortal Storm is a 1930s. It's romantic, but it's mostly an anti-Nazi novel by Phyllis Batome. It's one of my favorites. I want to turn it into a musical. And the movie stars Jimmy Stewart. And I was very excited to see it, and I found it on YouTube, and I watched it, and I was confused because the Germans in it don't seem to be Nazis, and they don't seem to be particularly mean. And that was in 1940, 1941 that movie was released, and I read about it. Hollywood still wasn't, they didn't want to upset the Germans. The Invisible Agent not only knows that the Nazis are villains, but makes them look, some of them look evil, and some of them look ridiculous. So just a couple of years, and Hollywood, and we know what happened between 1940 and 1942, but to change everyone's attitude. Except it wasn't the Nazis who attacked us, although in the movie the plot is that the Nazis want to do what the Japanese did. But anyway, we had entered World War II, and now the Nazis would become, I wonder, I know that I saw, when I looked it up, there was a list of movies where Nazis were suddenly the enemy. I wonder if this was among the first, like if this was early on in the Nazis are the enemy movies that came out in 1942. But I'm no expert on the history of Nazis being the villains in movies. But that was interesting to think about because I had that other movie as a frame of reference. Tomorrow we watch The Mummy's Tomb. That's the main one, another mummy movie, and whatever else that we watch, and I'll tell you about it when we get to it. But this was a fun. It's not my thing. Spy movies, military movies, but Invisible Man movies and superhero movies are. So have a lovely midnight.